Much of Boston's population recovery results from immigration. It's easy for impressions of immigration to be skewed by news reports of crisis or conflict. Thanks to the Boston Indicators Project at the Boston Foundation, it's also possible to get a more accurate headcount, the countries of origin for immigrants to Massachusetts over the past 40 years, and how the mix can be altered by domestic legislation or events around the world. To explain that picture in a new interactive map is the project's senior research associate, Peter Chorchak. Thank you very much for being with us, Peter.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Peter, some of this isn't exactly shocking to us as far as the mix of people and even the amount, but why was this project put together in the first place?
Well, we were interested in kind of seeing how recent immigration trends change and have changed over time. So we focused on 5 years ahead of each of the censuses between 1980 and 2010, and used our final year, 2019. And over that time, you can actually see how broader world events, how legislation, as you mentioned, the Hart-Celler Act in 1965, which was opened immigration to the world, have actually changed the mix of immigrants coming into Massachusetts. And we were really focused on those kind of small periods to see, okay, how has this changed here? How has this changed here? How has this changed here? And it actually shows a big, broader shift of immigration over the last 40 years from different parts of the world to kind of now into Latin America and Asian nations.
Well, back in 1965, I was going to a Boston public school. I had a couple of classmates from Chinatown who were able to use their real family names because of some law passed by Congress that I didn't understand, but that had a lot of consequences for Boston over the next, well, really half a century.
Yeah, no, for sure. A lot of, especially in 1980, as kind of relations with China were normalized, Deng Xiaoping, the premier at the time, opened the country to the world and opened it to emigration in particular. And a lot of Chinese students and a lot of Chinese nationals came over to Massachusetts at around that time and have been in the top 3 nations for emigration to Massachusetts since 1980.
Another thing that stands out in your map, maybe even more than anything else, is the immigration from Portugal. And maybe, I don't know if that includes things like people from Cabo Verde or even Brazil, but talk about the scale of that at least.
Sure, yeah, I believe you're referring to the 1980 as you select that. And that we included Cabo Verde, we included the Azores as well. But that also was a big surprise to me. And looking into it, I'm from Buffalo myself, so a lot of the Portuguese immigration into Massachusetts surprised me. And what it is a lot of people coming for better economic opportunity, a lot of people joining up with communities that were already existing here in New Bedford and Fall River, and a lot of folks just coming after the fall of the capitalist dictatorship, the Estado Novo, coming across and just kind of joining up with families and trying to make a new life for themselves. And a lot of those Portuguese settlements here in Massachusetts, both in the Southeast and also to a certain extent in Cambridge and Somerville, helped facilitate the Brazilian immigration that would come later.
I want to also have you talk about the overall size of immigration in Boston, because, there were certainly times in the history where there were surges. You go back to the 1800s with the Irish famine and later on at the turn of the 19th into the 20th century. But if you look at the past 40 years, how does that compare with some of those previous surges?
It's a little hard to say because we don't really have precise or the best records about those earlier periods of time. A lot of times we're kind of missing data, but what we can say for sure is that in the last 40 years or so, immigration to Massachusetts in particular, and this report is about Massachusetts generally, not just Boston itself, has really picked up. Just in the last 5 years, according to our estimates, roughly around 200,000 people came from across the world just in the last 5 years. To Massachusetts, and they came from Brazil, they come from India and China, lots of smaller European nations as well. and altogether, we've seen a real growth in immigration since 1965, when we had more formalized immigration rules and more formalized processes it put in place. This was, of course, after a lot of kind of more aggressive policies, the Chinese Exclusion Act and various other policies really kind of knocked our immigration down to a very low level.
And how does that fit into the overall population for the state? Because during most of the 20th century, Massachusetts was a net loser in population. So what does that mean now?
Well, as we studied in 2018, actually, a lot of the reason Massachusetts is growing is down to the foreign-born population. Folks coming from abroad coming to Massachusetts have helped contribute to its growth. In fact, there's a strong possibility, I would say, that one of the reasons the census apportionment came out, or the census apportionment numbers just came out for Census 2020, showed us about 100-something thousand people above our 2019 estimates. In terms of our overall population, something like a difference between 6.9 million to 7.05 million or something like that in terms of population. A lot of those are growth from abroad. It's one of our biggest strengths is we are that hub for a lot of different immigrating communities.
If you judge by a lot of the immigration debate going on, and I know this is more of a national debate than a local one, but you hear a lot of negatives about immigration. They need services, they need help learning English. They come here, they bring poverty with them. But on the other hand, how much of that is offset by economic growth? People who set up businesses, people who go into the workforce and develop skills.
Well, I don't know if I could put a precise number to that, but I can point you to one of our earlier reports on Powering Greater Boston's Economy, and it really dives into how much Latinos in particular are contributing to the growth of Massachusetts and the growth of Massachusetts economy. A lot of the folks that we get start their own businesses, they bring their families over to help work, and they're actually contributing meaningfully and perceptibly to not only Massachusetts' economy, but also our culture. We have new festivals, we have great food. There's a lot of reasons that Massachusetts is much better for having all of these folks.
I want to ask you about your map again, because one of the things it does is it allows us to see how things have changed in all these stages over the past 40 years. You mentioned, but if you go back to 1980 or so, you see a surge of people from Portugal, or at least Portuguese speaking. What about the more recent surges? I mean, how have things changed?
Sure. Yeah, actually, if I've kept this here, but we've got essentially over the last, since 1990, we've had a top three that has been dominant, top three countries of immigration to Massachusetts, including China, India, and Brazil. And those three have actually maintained the top slots for the last 30 years or so, in various different combinations.
In recent years, there have been other places that have been sending more of the flow of immigrants to the United States, let's say Haiti since 2010.
Oh, yes. Yeah. So we have different crises. The 2010 Haitian earthquake has contributed a lot to Haitian immigration to Massachusetts. And in many respects, those folks have joined up with existing Haitian communities that came over after during the dictatorships of Duvalier. The Dominican populations, we've seen basically constant Dominican immigration to Massachusetts due to better economic circumstances, escaping the dictatorship there as well. A lot of the kind of movement we've seen has come in certain respects due to these kind of economic circumstances, people seeking better life for themselves and their families, people seeking to escape political repression. In particular, one particular group of people that I was very surprised to see make the list was Russians. A lot of Russians came over in 1990 and 2000 after the collapse of the Soviet Union. Many of them are Russian Jews who came and helped create and bolster the knowledge economy. A lot of these are knowledgeable folks who are working in medical sciences and technological sciences, and came to Massachusetts seeking better wages and better times for their families.
One other thing that has struck me over the years about immigration is that although we usually talk about immigrants leaving places that are in distress or, in poverty, even when you meet the individuals, you find out you're talking to people who have a lot of skills, a lot of education. So I guess we should be cautioned about judging people by where they come from.
Oh yeah, no, I would agree. Absolutely. Folks come with a range of skills. A lot of them are, a lot of the, for instance, the Southeast Asian, the Indian immigrants are coming with bachelor's educations at least that are very well educated. We have a report on that as well that came out back in 2018. I would really caution against judging anyone from any country they came from.
Well, finally, Peter, if people want to look at this and sort of shift around with it and see what happens and how it works, what's the best way for them to find it online?
Yeah, it's right at the top of our homepage, bostonindicators.org.
All right, well, thank you very much for taking the time to walk us around the globe and see how it fits into Massachusetts.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me.
That was Peter Churchak from the Boston Indicators Project. We'll have more news in just a moment.